That I am going to turn over the microphone to Jenny O'Neill, who will introduce and conduct the the main portion of this meeting tonight, and I know it's going to be great, except for you, Everett. And I couldn't resist. Anyway, Jenny, can you take it from here?
Okay, thank you, Al. So I would like to begin by saying that today's program fits very well into a renewed effort by the Historical Society to capture and preserve knowledge on the cusp of being lost or forgotten. So much of our history, particularly in the second half of the 20th century and into our current century, is not preserved in written documents, but it is stored in the minds of our community elders. And we need to make a more proactive effort to capture this. Along those lines, I did want to tell this particular group about our plans for an exhibition on Hurricane Carol. So next year, 2024, is the 70th anniversary of Hurricane Carol. So we felt it's a good time to focus on that. So I'm looking for photos, stories, any information you might wish to share, please contact the Westport Historical Society. To this program today, a special thank you to Everett Mills for suggesting this program on sword fishing. And I also ask you in the audience for your own ideas, especially if you are in your 60s, 70s, or older, for other topics that we should highlight. I want to thank both Richie and Everett Mills for the time and effort that they have both put into preparing for this program. It has been so much fun for me to hear some of their stories, and I thank them for sharing their personal collections of photos with the Historical Society. All of the materials that you see today and that you will see projected have been scanned and cataloged into our collection, and I also encourage you to look at our we have created a special page devoted to sword fishing and everything, including the video that this program is being recorded, that will all be posted to that particular page on our website. Also on our website are interviews from some of our old-timers who are no longer with us. Ab Palmer and Kuki Makamba. I also want to thank Nathaniel Allen for sharing the spectacular photographs taken by his father, David Allen, on board the Unicorn of Martha's Vineyard in the 1980s. Some of those are on display at the back of the room. So on stage we have Richie Earl, Everett Mills, Grant Moore, and Paul Brayton. In the audience we have Howie Gifford, and Russ Hart is not able to be with us this evening. The format of this program is fairly informal. We have some images to show. Richie will start off the conversation. We welcome questions and comments from you, the audience. And I have the difficult task of being timekeeper, and I have to tell you that earlier on, as we were setting up, I heard one of the guys say they could talk forever. So be prepared, but I will endeavor to keep this program to about an hour. Okay, thank you. So over to you, Richie.
One, two, three, you can hear me. Thanks for coming. So I've got to go through some pictures here. No. So anyway, I'm going to try to go through some old pictures here and describe some stuff. And these other guys will get going, and then maybe some questions and answers at the end. But first of all, thanks for coming.
Wouldn't miss it.
Wouldn't miss it. Anyway, so this first picture here is my partner, Paul Brayton. 1920. All right, we'll get serious here for a minute. This first picture here, we think is of Bill Head. Bill Head lived at Westport Point. His address was 2026 at Tom and Barbara Slate's house today. And I used to deliver newspapers to Bill when I was about 12 years old. And then he was kind of old then, so I think he was born maybe 1880, I don't know, 1890, something like that. My dad, Milton Earl, used to fish with him. So this here boat is just an old cat boat with a motor in it. And they've got a pulpit on the front with a harpoon similar to what we've got today. And everything that you saw fish-wise with this kind of rig was finning fish, swordfish fin. If they're up, they call it horned up. Both fins, the dorsal and tail fin are out of the water maybe that far. Sometimes it's only a little bit. So whatever they came across was the finning fish. They couldn't see underwater really. So no mast or anything. So we go to the next one. This here is a drawing that was about 1954 of the Westport town dock looking over to the Cherry Webb Lane, which we used to call the Boatyard Lane. And that's my brother Deacon's boat shop. So this is 1954 because the hurricane spun around. And Edna Louvelink, who was the art teacher, drew this picture. But the picture right here, this boat here, you'll notice the pilot house, it's got a mast, it's got a pulpit. That was the Oren Crapo's boat. And that was about 32 feet long, and it was a lobster boat. You notice it's got a pulpit, it's got a mast now, with ratlings on the mast, so you could go up and get up in the air a little bit. So things are evolving now. This is 54. Bill Head was probably back around 1930 or whatever. So now that people realize that if you put a longer pulpit on and start going up in the air, it's easy to get these things, these swordfish. So we'll go to the next picture. This is a picture that's been in Al's father's store for a long time. And it's the Bicracky and the Bugsy, these two here. The Bugsy was Ted Edmonds' boat, and you notice it has a fly bridge on it with a mast. So we're going up higher all the time here. The steering's up here on the fly bridge. The Bicracky was a dragger, Eastern dragger, with rings up the top of their mast. But it's a single mast. So you can see the evolution here, we're going up in the air. People used to come down here. I'm actually in this picture up in this corner up here somewhere. Right here, that's me there with my mother holding me. So I think it's 1944 or 1945, I'm not sure. But this picture, people used to come down to Lee's Wharf, which is Al's grandfather's place, and unload fish there. He was a fish buyer, and he always had fresh fish, and he had lobster boats. And Bob Hebden and Art Denal owned the Bicracky. He's there weighing a fish, watching Al Lee's. This is Al Lee's senior here. This is his son, Carlton Lee's. And Art Denal's here watching it.
Make sure the correct weight.
Yeah. So anyway, people used to go down there. You got to realize this is at the end of the war. This is 1944 or 45. The war ended in 45, I think in May of 45. So there was no television back then. It was something for people to do. Get out, stretch your legs, I guess. The blackouts, I guess, they had the shades pulled down. They used to do beach patrols in the Second World War on horseback with the installation out on Gooseberry. So this was, but it's funny, Ted Hebden had a yacht during the war, and they'd go out sword fishing during the war. Yeah, can we go to the next one? This one here looks like the broad green. Can you see that? Is this the broad bill?
That's the broad bill, and that's you out on the bulkhead, actually.
Look how skinny you are.
Yeah, this is Grant's boat. This is probably about 1980, 81, something like that. Anyway, she's rigged up. You see how high the mast is? And we're getting seats up there, so steering, you can steer from up there now. So we're going higher, and the pulpit's long. A lot of radar reflectors for gear when you put them out. You got the harpoon that's up here. I don't know if you saw it or not. But the dart goes in the fish from the harpoon. There's a long line, depending on the depth of the water that you're in, maybe up to 600 feet of line.
See this?
Yeah, don't fall over, Manny.
Don't worry.
Who are you aiming for?
You. That's the only thing I can't miss.
Anyway,
You can listen to that picture, he's so skinny.
yeah, so anyway, it was a choice, you know, you put a fish out, you gotta put a line to it, to the dart, and like, they used kegs, wooden kegs years ago. Then about in the 60s, we got Norwegian balls. These orange inflatable things, they showed up in the mid-60s, I'd say. Before that, it was car inner tubes or glass balls with nets around it. But anyway, so this is the broadcast. So you see how we're going higher though all the time. We got to get these airplanes in the sky here at some point. This is Paul Brightline brought this boat up from Florida. It's a shrimper, 65-foot shrimper, and you can see the mast, and you'd see it from way up at the top. And anyway, this is coming around the Nubble. Get the next one. How we doing? This is the Quest. This is Everett and Curtis's boat. Curtis Duvall and Everett Mills's boat. She was built. Where was she built? Everett.
Hawkins Island, North Carolina.
Yeah, and there was another boat from Westport that was built there too. It was Albert Rosita's, wasn't it?
Sheila and Linda, yeah. She was 55.
We'll tell you a story about that. Unfortunately, the owner died from an accident. You get the next one? This one here, you can see the mast is getting higher. You get the idea? So this is Billy Gell's boat, the Gale. She fished out of New Bedford for a while. Billy flew. We were hoping he could make it, but he couldn't make it. So Billy did a lot of sword fishing. His dad had a boat at the yacht club called the Bovet, back from 1952 to 1965, I think. So Billy got the bug of sword fishing. Anyway, next one. This is a Westport boat. This is the Sheila and Linda. This is Albert Rosita's boat. Right, Ed? Yep. And he put out a fish one time. He was way down in the west part near Ladonia. He put out a fish one day, and the weight, after he struck the fish head, we have a heavy weight on it to keep the line from getting in the wheel propeller. And somehow or other they had a screw up, and the weight came back and hit him side of the head. He made it back to Westport. But he died about 2 or 3 days later. This is the Harry Glenn. Dave Braden's boat. Billy Treddy used to be on it. Helped Dave, ran it for him. But you can see here now the mast, the topmast, are getting up in the air here. So people, you can't, sword fishing is like hunting. You've got to hunt for them first before you can catch them. So you got to see them. And to see down in the water, you need a sunny day usually, not too many clouds. You need calm weather. And height is important. So these boats are getting higher and higher. And I don't know, I think there's been some boats. I showed Paul one on a video the other day. How tall do you think that mast was, Paul? 60, 65 feet above the water. Wow. So you just picture yourself going back and forth. All day long. I used to get up the mast at 9 o'clock in the morning and come down about 4 in the afternoon. I had a little basket to pull it up. I was like a monkey. Getting fed like a monkey, right, Grant? So anyway, so this is the Harry Glenn, and this really, you can see there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys aloft. So that's 5 sets of eyes. So back in the old days, in the 40s, the more guys you could take out on the boat, the more eyes you had. And the guys that had good eyes got the best sights. Anyway, next picture. This is a picture of Rodney Abler on the Trident. He's out of New Bedford, big rod. He used to call his boat the light ship because it was red, like the light ship was painted. And he stayed out there for weeks and weeks. But anyway, this is just before he's throwing it to hit this fish, and it's a pretty amazing picture, I think.
499-pound fish, and in those days, Rodney weighed 320.
Hey Manny, you got a phone over there? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, and then the evolution of the poles. This pole here is a wooden pole. In the old days, they had wooden poles like a banister railing. And they would get soaked in fog and rain, and they'd change weight, which made it hard, and they'd have a sag in it. So when you went to throw them, things would kind of straighten up a little bit.
It's just an excuse.
Yeah, right. So anyway, you'll notice this here, we got into aluminum poles. The weight's constant, they're stiff, what would you say, Grant, they're 15 feet?
Yeah, anywhere from 14 to 16,
Yeah.
depending on how high your pulpit is.
So the idea here was to hit them up near the dorsal fin somewhere. And, want to go to the next one? This is the slideshow, the sideshow. Somebody asked, how come you named it the sideshow? I'm going to blame this one on Paul. He named the company Sea Circus Inc., so we needed a couple of acts. So we ended up with a sideshow and the bearded lady. Didn't name the airplane, did you? No. So anyway, so these have got mermaids here. We've got a couple of mermaids. There was a 4-foot diameter. They were painted by Betsy McDonald. And anyway, it's a poem that Rick Dye, who went fishing with us, he's a poet. His feet show it, they're Longfellows. But anyway, poet, I don't know, is poet here today? I guess not. Anyway, poet wrote about it. We struck a fish one day and it got mad. It came back in and it hit the mermaid on the left. Drove the sword right into it. And I don't know if you looked up there, but I left a picture up here that Francis Patton left of a swordfish coming up through the bottom of a dory. And it stuck so hard, right to its eyeballs. They had to lift the boat out of the water, the dory out of the water, to get the swordfish out of the boat. Yeah, there's a picture of it up in the back. Anyway, so these were Betsy's creations so for the sideshow. And next. This here is a pilot here, John Beavis. And Everett, you take over.
Before I start, once the dart goes in and it gets pulled, it turns sideways so it can't come out. That allows us to pull it in. There's 3 important things here. The handsome pilot, John Beavis. The big box over his left shoulder in the back. Can everybody see that shiny white thing? That's a North Star Lorraine C. That's the boat style, but they didn't have any airplane styles back then, so we had to use the boat, and we couldn't mount them anywhere but behind us. And a lot of the pilots had rear view mirrors here. Read the numbers. We had 2 numbers, a 14,000 and a 44. 44 was east-west, 14 was north-south. And you flew the line. 200 miles out in the ocean with that. And the third important thing here is written on the side of the plane. It says Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And we named him that because he landed a plane twice in the water.
The first one, I think, was because he hadn't pumped fuel up, forgot to pump fuel up to the wings in the belly tank. And the second one, he just bounced it hard on landing.
Fell asleep.
Fell asleep.
I didn't want to say he fell asleep. There's nobody here from the...
We could have renamed him Skimmer.
When we flew in after a 7-hour day in the air, we're coming back against the southwest wind. We always flew low. And believe it or not, at 60 feet off the water, the wings compress, and with the big waves, the plane goes like that. It put John to sleep. I hear that the luck part of this was when he hit the wave in front, the survival suit in the back seat hit the throttle, and he went,
Anyway, so we're getting up to the pilots now. What's the next picture? I'm not sure what to see. That's one of the planes. Whose is it? That's Everett's plane. No, 7-4.
Echo, that's mine. Oh,
Is that,
I didn't know they were fluocetarda. I had 4 of them. So they're all cubs. No, one cub and
but one thing I'd like to mention, from a historical point of view, Arthur Dalton, Ted Hampton were the fishermen on the Bicrackie, and then the Bridget Ann, and then the Rodman Swift. And then in about 1962, Art Denault got an airplane, and it was a Piper, and no communications really. And that's another whole story. I don't know if we have time today for that, but the thing I want to mention is it only had 36 gallons in the wings. So you go out and fly and find the boat, come back 2.5 hours later, fly into the vineyard in Katoma, is it? Katama, and there's a grass strip, refuel the wings, and then go back out and then back here, land in Fall River. But when we really got serious into the sword fishing, you notice the belly tank on the bottom? That's a 65-gallon belly tank. Plus some of the pilots that they had,
90.
these were 90-gallon?
No, 65, but they were 90s. We could get 90s.
Yeah. And then they also, a couple of them I think had jerry jugs in the back seat. So they could, I don't know, how long could you guys stay up? Maybe 10, 12 hours total? Yeah.
12 hours.
And so I'm not sure what the sequence is here, so.
Just imagine what it was like sitting in this chair for, a typical day was 10 and a half, 11 hours, just like this. You couldn't straighten your legs out, you couldn't stand up, the windows were open, it was windy, and you had to look all the time and keep flying, and we were only like 600 feet off the water, so you had to pay attention. And there were 15 other guys out there doing the same thing, so you had to be looking for other planes, looking to see where the boat was, and looking for fish all at the same time. You get tired at the end of the day.
And you had to be regular.
Yeah, I think,
By the way, Paul is the only one of us with military experience. He flew during the Nam War and landed jets on aircraft carriers. Thank you for your service. And before I forget, I'd like to pay a tribute also to David Allen, who's a close friend, and his photography is incredible.
I just wanted to comment on the hours that the pilots put in every day, day in and day out. The boats might be out for 2 weeks, and basically we'd be sitting there waiting and be in the fog for 4 days, but the pilots would get up every morning. Every day they'd be up, we'd check with them, we'd say, no, no good, go home. I think for the pilots looking out for planes, there was as much pressure on the captains to make sure that their pilots didn't fall asleep, that they pumped up the fuel. We were constantly, and Richie taught me this. I'm here because of Richie and Paul. They are the people that are responsible for me being here. They're the ones that got me into this. But I can remember, sitting back and watching Richie always talking to Paul, hey, you pumped up. That was it. That was the expression all the time. And the fear was that a pilot gets busy, and there were often times, Paul would take a turn and go, oh, I got one here, I drop a mark, okay, mark that one, I've got a couple over here. So as you were steaming to a fish, now the boat sees the fish. So it could get pretty hectic. And a pilot could lose track of time and look, not look at the wing gauges, correct?
No.
Right? And then all of a sudden, they think you're sputtering and you're going in the water. So, and then as a captain, the responsibility is to keep the boat separate, right? And make sure that you're not fishing into another boat with a plane right there, because guys are looking down. They're not looking out. They're flying. Yeah, you looked out. But I just wanted to pass that along. It was it could get pretty hectic. It was hectic, and I think the one thing amongst the 4 of us up here, and this I won't say holds true for the industry, but for the 4 of us here, it was a passion. It wasn't about going out and making a living or anything else like that. It was a passion. It was trying to figure out how to do it better. And the evolution that took place in Westport, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. I was very fortunate enough to come into this. with the advent of the planes and the higher mass when I first started, Richie would send me up to Grundy's, right? I'd come back with about 6 of these things, and then I'd sit down at the dock and I'd shape the end of it and I'd screw on the ferrules, and that's how I started throwing a pole, was one of these, and then I was afraid to go to an aluminum pole because I knew I could hit him with this, but I didn't know if I could hit him with an aluminum pole.
It was different.
Yeah, but the aluminum pole, it just hit that much harder.
Oh, it was
Right.
straighter.
Yeah, I mean, to try to hit a fish that was 8 or 10 feet underwater, and you're trying to drive a piece of wood, right? It wants to come back at you. And oftentimes, you'd backbone a fish, and the boat would be coming down, and the pole would be in the fish, and the pole would come up and get you right in the gut, pick you right up out of the pulpit. The nice thing was these would snap. The aluminum poles don't.
I'm just winging it here. Do we have any more photos coming up?
824, what is that, 824, is that you, Paul?
That's bull.
Is that red or blue?
They
That's
use,
green.
this is the
Green,
green.
Everett.
I'm a fish spotter.
The
Tie up
pilot,
your shirt.
Red or green?
the pilots used to, at the end of the day, try to sneak up on us. You'd be up in the mast, up at the top, and all of a sudden they give you a haircut. Yeah.
So this picture is probably first thing in the morning. We'd very often drop off a newspaper and some fresh donuts and stuff like that. Cigarettes, whatever. Well, I'll tell you a funny compendium to that. At the end of the day, this particular day, one of the pilots in the boat was Joe Avila, Jr. And he was saying goodbye to the boat, and the cook on the boat was named Josie. Josie says, "Hey, Junior, you mind bringing a few groceries out for us tomorrow?" We did it all the time. Cigarettes, bread, crackers, cheese. And Josie adds to the end of the list, he said, "And we need a dozen eggs." Now, mind you, we're dropping this off at about 80 or 90 miles an hour onto the water, which is like asphalt, and a dozen eggs. So Junior says, "Yeah, no problem, Josie." And he thinks about it. Junior couldn't let that go. So he goes home and he buys the groceries, buys a dozen eggs, takes them home, hard boils 11. The next day, after about 2 hours, about 10 o'clock in the morning, he calls Josie up. He said, "Josie, how'd the food make out?" And he said, "Beautiful, Junior, only broke one egg."
On a serious note, Grant, you remember the day Paul had to drop us a package on the direction? No, on the Broadville. The air starter.
A starter?
Air start.
Yeah,
This is to start the engine.
So the
main engine.
usual practice would be you'd fish all day and then you'd find a spot and usually go up in the shoulder water where the water was a little cooler, which would slow down the ice melting in your fish hole. So you'd go up there and you'd shut down. And so I did that. The next day I went up there and I woke up in the morning and fire up. Wouldn't start. I had an air starter on the boat and we blew the vanes inside the starter. So we were sitting there and basically just drifting. And it's pretty frustrating when you're sitting there drifting and you're looking out and you're seeing this swimming along, this swimming along. And I give Paul a call. I said, "Listen, this is a minor ask." I said, "I just need you to go up to Cummins, pick up an air starter and figure out how to drop it to me."
Yeah, that's
Yeah. So anyway, Paul, got in his truck, drove up there, picked up the starter, came out, and he's trying to figure out how the heck he's going to drop him. I don't know, must have been about 70, 80 pounds, and keep it afloat. I forget, what did you do? Put it in survival suits?
I put it in a survival suit bag and had some other, as much flotation as I could possibly get in this bundle and get out the window. So it wasn't a small package, but I was afraid if I wasn't the right kind of package, the package hit the water, the starter might have gone right through it and sunk, so I had it pretty well wrapped up. And, we got a safe delivery, but
So I get the package aboard, open it up, unwrap it, Wrong starter.
Had the wrong rotation.
So now another day of
Laying there.
basically laying there and trying to convince another vessel that's not very far from me that it was okay for him to just go down and take the 3 bolts out, disconnect the airline, and pass me his starter, because that was the right starter. So it took me a day to convince this guy, which I won't give a name, and he passed it over, and I told him, I promised him, I said, 15 minutes, I'll have it back to you. Put that starter in, we started up, I cranked down the manual override on the injection pump so nobody could shut it off, and we were able to continue fishing, but that was a lost 4 days, I think, and a lot of effort on Paul's part, but those are the sort of things that went on all the time.
And we caught fish all around you.
Yeah, I know. That was a hard one to go through.
So we're getting more pictures, Jen? Okay, so we have basically in a swordfish thing here, the first picture you saw was a 2-man operation, a wheelman and a harpoon. But as we get into bigger boats, more fish and other things, it's basically a striker, a wheelman, a railman, and a doryman. And this is Alex Lennon, Chris Lennon's father. He's that doryman. You can see he sits there. And the first time we put him out in a dory that we did any business, we were down by beaches, and we put out about 10 fish one day, and Alex had to pull them all by hand. He came back, he looked like he was wilted. So told Paul, we need a hauler in this dory, so Paul got a gasoline capstan and put some rollers up, and that made Alex happy. But when we were fishing, we put out fish, we get a half a dozen fish, especially if they were close together. We'd dump the dory over with Alex, and he'd spend the day hauling fish. And one night, we didn't pick him up till 10 o'clock at night. Rodney Apple on the Trident stood by him. But, you know, when you get a lot of fish, you get busy. And but Alex loved it.
We had to put steel plates in the bottom of those dories to protect against the swordfish. That picture back there, because they actually did it. In fact, history says that the whalers used to find swords on the side of whales all the time.
Another picture?
There it is.
Yeah, here's Alex. I think the most he came back to the boat with was 10 fish and 11 rigs. You'll notice Norwegian balls. That's about a 16-foot skiff. And he's got them tied up by the tails. And then, sometimes, one time we harpooned sharks. And somebody's phone. Anyway, one time, shut mine off.
OCD.
One time we were west of Ladonia a little bit, and we harpooned a bunch of fish, and they were in the water for a while. When we hauled them back, about 4 or 5 of them had shark bites in their backs. Yeah, about that wide. I don't know what kind of sharks got them, but anyway, next picture.
Oh, right, this is the...
Oh, here's the picture of the. I don't know if you can see it back there. Can you see that picture? Yeah, here's his eyeballs right here. And he's probably 3 feet up inside, and he didn't come out. They had to lift the dory out of the water to get the fish aboard. Crazy, huh? Yeah, next picture.
That's
Well,
it.
we were harpooning them.
That's it. That's it.
Okay, that's for that. We got, I noticed, this is kind of a history group. I'll let these guys talk, or Jen talk. We didn't talk about the sport boats that fished out of Westport. How about, what do we got for time here? So anyway, I just want to put my glasses on. I wrote a list of them here. It's kind of funny. Sword fishing brings everybody together. Doctors, lawyers, fishermen, you name it. But at any rate, I'll read off some of the boats that fished back. I got it. So anyway, lobster boats and sport boats. This is 30 to 40 foot stuff with pulpits. No, well, most of them didn't have airplanes. We started with Cora F. Bill Head, Orrin Crapo, the Idlewild, Joe Brulard, the Janus B, and Don Chase, the Betty and March. Those were lobster boats that had pulpits that fished out of Westport back in the 50s. Art Denal, Ted and Bob Hebden. The sport boats, we had the Black Duck, Johnny Codwell's boat. Ab Palmer, who used to be the shellfish warden, he and his brother Ray used to go on that boat. The strikers, Eddie Croak had a boat called the Broadbill. There was a Jane that went in the '54 hurricane. It was a sailboat that John S. Brayton had. Related to you, right, Paul? Cousin or something? Uncle. The Jane went into the bridge of the hurricane. Then he got another boat called the Captain Jack, which had a fly bridge. Down at Westport Harbor, there was the Salem with Asa and George Bashara owned, and then Billy Truesdale bought it, I think. Up at the dock, at the town dock, there was Don Austin, had the Dolphin, Norman Kay, the guy that built the first Moby Dick, Sheldon Judson. He had a boat called the Norman Kay, kept it at Lee's Dock, and at Westport Yacht Club there was the Bovic. Billy Gell's father had that boat there about 13 years. The Tarfu, the LeCompte, Roland LeCompte at the Westport Yacht Club. Lawyer Talbot Tweedy had one called the Salem Burgundy at Trips. Walter Brown, who was in the insurance business, he had one called the Panacea. Mickey Chadwick, who lived at the end of the point, had one called the Freshman, then the Chandlin. And then Dr. Fitton had one called the Wanderer. And Doc had the Bug. That was his escape. He bought an airplane. So, then there was a guy at Trips Boatyard, the Ocean Hunter, Reed Bragg. The Bender, which was Bud Squire. And, like I said, Billy Truesdale had one. I think it was the Salem one.
Manitou was the first.
Yeah. So then there was some other boats. Ray Duvall had the Fagawi One. It was Herman Green's old boat. They had the package store in Little Compton. The Robin Hood. Bob Lee's had a boat called the Robin Hood. The Muscle, Jack Reese, his family owned the Pequachuck Inn. Russ Hathard had one called the Genie H. That was a lobster boat. The KT was my father's boat. And, yeah. Billy Borges had, I think it was the Gene B. You Gotta Believe, Milt Brulard, Senior, young Milty, was lobster, and unfortunately he got lost at sea. And that's kind of the old boats. So,
Stop the chance.
Question and answers.
Should we give Howie a chance?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's ready to go.
Howie Gifford, do you want to say a few words?
Most of them have been said, but people wanted to go lobstering. That was the thing to do. One of these stories I can mention quickly is Jackie Reese was just remembered that he had a boat, used to go fishing. We decided he needed a bigger boat. So we went to New Bedford, and there was a fairly large boat that had been sunk, been raised, and the price was right. So Jackie bought the boat, cleaned it up the best he could, and decided that the dockage rates in New Bedford or Fairhaven were too high, so he'd bring it to Westport. And he started the engine up after it had been sunk, and it ran very good. So we decided, I'll get some buddies and we'll bring it over to Westport. And one of them was Bill Tripp. I think he may be here tonight, I'm not sure. And the other one was Chucky Mackenbach. And of course, Jackie. Well, they started down Buzzards Bay heading for Westport. And sure enough, the engine died. He forgot to get the mud out of the diesel tank. and they just couldn't get it going. They didn't have any more filters. So they're drifting with the wind heading towards Michon Point. They had to do something. They put a couple of small weights and anchors out with the winch cable, and that didn't work. So they got a big bucket, filled it full of old drain oil, and lit it afire to try to attract the Coast Guard, because of course they didn't have a radio. Well, the Coast Guard did show up, but the boat was already in the rocks, and it went hard aground on Nimsha. What's the name of the point? Michon Point. And the Kilkie, of course, couldn't swim. So they got a 2.5 gallon oil can that was empty, and they tied it to his waist. And he had no choice, and he jumped overboard and made it ashore. The other person, Bill, I don't know how he got ashore, but he's here, I think. You here, Bill? No, I guess he didn't make it. But I do remember the man that came to save everybody was Bob Hepton. He somehow got word there was a boat in trouble and was able to get the boat and picked up, bring home. But the engine, I think, is still over there on the beach. That's, I think, the main story that I could talk about. There's quite a few others. Let me see. All is one that I had. I had a 30-foot boat with an A-frame mast and pulpit. And Dick Brown and I used to go out just for the fun of it, strictly, doing what we could. But Dick Brown had worked on the Bozo out of Nimshabite, so I assumed he knew how to fish, and he did. So we went out one morning and thick fog. We said, uh-oh. On his opinion, it was going to clear. So we went down off Block Island in the fog, and what did we see but a fin? And Dick told me where to go, and he nailed it right behind the, I guess you call it the dorsal fin. So we got ourselves a pretty good little fish. And just about got the fish aboard, and half of the United States Navy went plowing by us. They were on maneuvers, and they probably knew where we were, but we didn't know where they were. Both of us were scared stiff. But we got the fish on the boat anyway. I had a lot of fun because I moved to Connecticut, and Richie was just talking about boats getting harpooned with a sword. Well, I got a working electric boat. I was assigned to build on a crew that built a couple of mini subs. And sure enough, they took this, one of the boats out of Woods Hole, came out that night, came back in that night, hauled the boat out of water, and here's a sword broken off in the fairing with the pressure hull of the boat, dive boat that Woods Hole used.
Yeah.
And Alvin, yeah. And maybe some of you fellas that old-time fishermen remember out of knowing Ben Rathman. He said, how come you guys up in Westport as sissies? You all have to take a dory. That's a waste. So he hauled out to get the bottom painted, and here's a sword broken right off in the bottom of his boat. He crawled down in the bilge, and the end of the sword is only about 2 inches away from the fuel tank. So I think after that, he took a dory with him. He was a charter boatman and used to take people for the trip. But I can see, didn't you? I got some more small ones, but it just shows you what can happen if you don't know what you're doing.
There's 2 or 3 more here. I know there's gonna be a question and answer period, but, from my personal point of view, being up the mast all day, I saw, Jonathan Mayu crash his plane. He got out okay, south of Nomans. That was kind of weird being up in the mast. He was about 5 miles away. I saw the splash. And, you know, Octodalt ditched his plane off New Jersey. Beavis, we told you about him, so.
Jim Glyman.
Jim Glyman, yeah,
Watching whales.
watching whales, he had a ditch. But they crawl out of them. There was one story that, you know, if you're up in the mast, you see a lot of funny things. Nobody mentioned the word breacher. When fish get nervous, maybe if they're being chased by a shark or something, they jump out of the water. They call it, the swordfish, they call it a breacher. Well, one day we had a breacher. Paul was flying, Grant was striking out in the pulpit, and this thing kept going and going and going. It got very predictable. So Grant, will you pick up and tell him what happened? I mean, this thing made about 20 jumps.
Yeah, if I remember right, we were, Tadpole was with us. We had a big day up on the Northeast Peak, and it was one of those nights. It was glass. It was like a mirror. And I think it was you that said, "Hey, you got to look at this." And off the port side, we watched this fish up out of the water, the whole fish, total breach.
Wow.
And it kept doing it, and it just kept repeating. And so Richie says to me, "Go out on the stand." So I go out on the stand, and I literally watched this fish probably another 3 times. I could watch it come out of the water. I could see it underwater going along. I could see it coming up. And I said to myself, this thing's going to jump right in front of me. And so I unstrapped the pole, and I watched this fish, and it came down, and it came up right in front of me, and I threw the pole and ironed the fish. Probably a one in a million chance, right, that's ever going to happen.
Paul could see it from the airplane. He could see the thing go down. He says, he's coming up again.
Okay, so
And he come and he went then down again and up again, and it was so predictable. So it just started to lead them, and that was kind of a crazy one. One other, yeah, we got a question down here. Howie?
I got one more story, I think.
I knew we couldn't keep you down, Howard.
It was, my dad kept telling me that, my dad used to tell me that I should go with somebody that knows what they're doing and knows how to catch a swordfish and the tricks of the trade. So the next day, my brother and his wife and I went out on my boat, and we were cruising by 2 Mile Spindle, headed for the lightship. This is back when there was a lightship. We saw this steamer coming down Buzzards Bay, belching black smoke like mad. And I told my brother, I said, that steamer must have hit a small skiff anchored up, probably bottom fishing. But let's get over there and see if anything we can help. So we crossed over near the stern of this big steamer, and it looked big, I'll tell you. The next thing we heard was a voice yelling, and it was a Westport lobster, a swordfisherman in the water. So we went over and picked him up, and it was Bob Hepton, probably one of his equally good swordfishermen out of Westport. He broke the cardinal rule, didn't have a watchman on, and ran full speed right into the side of that freighter. And of course, what hit was the pulpit. Well, the pulpit pushed sideways. It wasn't the strongest thing. He yanked the pulpit practically off, tore the stem wide open, and of course, down it went. Well, not all the way. It bobbed up again. Another Westport boat, they got a line on it, and they towed the boat into Westport, and trips hauled it out on the ways. That boat was totally rebuilt, and it lived to go fishing again. I just figured, it even happens
Just a couple of quick things. One fish with Dr. Fitton's boat, we were out one day, the Wanderer. We went down the northwest side of the dump, the west side, and then across the south and up. And Jonathan Mayhew, who flew out of the vineyard for the Quitzer Strider and the Unicorn, he came out to fly for us. So we picked up a fish right away about 10 in the morning. And then it was getting hazy, you couldn't see. I could see haze between me and the airplane. We went on another fish, it settled. And then I said to Jonathan, I said, it's getting kind of hazy, isn't it? He said, yeah. He said, I'm gonna head in. So he left us in the southeast corner of the dump, and he's, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes later, I hear him on the radio, he's got a swordfish. He's coming back to the Vineyard Muskegon, back that way. So anyway, Dr. Fitton and Dick Squire are up at the mast. I'm on the bridge, and I get my little calculator going. He's 13 miles north of us. Dr. Fitton's boat, when it was dry, would do 26 knots. Wet, it was probably 20, 22, something like that. So anyway, I figured, well, I'm just gonna start heading in that direction. So I opened the thing up, and here's Dr. Fitton and Dick Squire up the top, their pants are blowing, and I'm not telling what's going on. So finally, I got to the point where I could see the plane on the radar. He was, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles ahead. And there was another boat, a sport boat, that was doing 13 knots. It was coming up. So Jonathan said, well, I'll give it to whoever gets here first. So we kept coming. It took 50 minutes. Poor Dick Squires, a striker. So I hollered up, I don't know, we were about 5 miles away. I hollered up to Dick. I said, hey, get down here. We're going to go on a fish. So the thing never thinned. It stayed underwater the whole time. And Dick hit the fish, and we got the fish. But it was 50 minutes he had that fish. Imagine, I don't know, did you ever fly that long, you guys?
What?
Over one fish.
50 minutes?
50 minutes.
No, we throw chalk on and leave it.
Yeah.
Leave it.
Anyway, that was kind of a funny one, but let's see, Everett, yeah.
200 miles offshore, northeast of Corsair Canyon somewhere, foggy morning. The planes have to land in Nantucket. Fishing vessel, Sideshow, and Quest are laying about 500 feet from one another. 500 feet, half a mile. It's that kind of fog that is a dome. You could see the bright above, but you could see clear above and below. And we're all having coffee, but everybody looks when you're sword fishing because you never can tell. And all of a sudden, one of my guys yelled, "There's a swordfish off the stern of the Sideshow." And I go, "Oh boy." And they want to race into the mast. I said, no, let's not panic. Let's not show Richie that we're coming toward him. I want to idle toward his bow. Don't go toward the stern and let him know that's where the fish is, toward his bow. And we idled across and got within distance, so I knew he couldn't turn around and get it. Nobody's on deck of the Sideshow, strangely enough. And so I told my guys, okay, let's go. And my wheelman climbs up on the mast. I go out on the stand. The harpoon is cocked, ready to go. We steam around the back of the Sideshow, and there's a 2x6 with 2 fins nailed to it. True story, but now all the crew of the Sideshow's outside laughing.
Anyway.
Always catch something.
I was going to get him one time.
We were thinking about having Paul call me on a fish, but I think we're doing good for time. Want to go into question and answers?
Yeah.
We will take a few questions from the audience. I think just stand up and... Yes?
Richard, you were saying a little while ago that the pilots like used to sneak up on you. Paul, can you elaborate on how you snuck up on all those, every time you came to a boat?
Yeah. It was pretty simple. You'd wait till they were steaming upwind. And then you'd climb, you get a little altitude, go up to 1,500 or 2,000 feet, cut the engine back to idle so they couldn't hear it. You'd take a steep dive and come right over the top of the mast and then crack the throttle on. Just over his hat, you know?
That's not what I remember.
Yeah.
I remember you coming in at a way top level
two ways to do it.
You used to throw out the window at the boat.
Yeah.
So, before we get into any more questions, I'm sure I would imagine a lot of you are wondering what's happened to this fishery. And it's, I myself feel very fortunate. I started this probably when it was at its peak, in the, let's say 75. And I fished up until, let's see, 83, 45, 85, 86. So the harpoon fishery coexisted along with a very, very strong longline fishery. We had an incredible amount of effort from the longline fleet, which at that time I would say was compromised on the Georges Bank fishery, not the Grand Banks fishery. There were probably 30 to 40 boats that would fish the whole southern side of Georges Banks. We met a guy when we were up in Nova Scotia who was doing a tag program on swordfish, and his comment to us was, I don't understand how you guys make this a fishery, because a swordfish never is, in other words, the time in a 24-hour period that a swordfish comes to the surface is very, very minimal. So that told us that the resource had to be very, very strong. In 1985, 86, the Hague Line decision went into effect, which affected the offshore swordfish fleet. You could no longer fish basically our traditional grounds, which was east of the Hague Line, which would say, let's start at Georges Canyon, Corsair Canyon, Fiddler's Cove, up to the northeast peak, and then a good part of the northern edge up to Browns Bank. So all that ground was basically taken away from us. And during this whole process, the climate change, effort on the fishery, for me, and I was probably one of the last guys harpooning, I had a day that was, you couldn't have asked for a better day. We were fishing as far east as I could go. The water was right, everything was there. Ball was flying. We looked from, you got out there probably at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. We wanted to get a good day in. There was a friend of ours, a Canadian fellow, fishing about 15 miles east of me, and he had no plane. By 12 o'clock, I think he had 20 fish in the water. By 1 o'clock, we saw one little road runner, we call him. It was like a blue dart just swimming east. And I said to Paul, I said, go fly for Franklin. Tell me what you want to pay me for the plane. I'm done. And unfortunately, that's basically what's happened to that fishery. I don't know, this year, for example, we hadn't put a stand on the boat. Our lobster gear is traditionally in the prime, harpoon grounds, right? We transit those areas, we fish through those areas all summer. Everything has changed. Water's changed, bait, where the bait is has changed.
Quit tapping your fingers.
So, this year, early on, we saw 2 fish early. My son came to me and said, what do you think? I said, let's throw the stand on. It takes us a half hour. We put the stand on, we never saw another fish. We didn't have any weather either, but it's changed. NOAA says the resource has been rebuilt. I would question that to the extent of for a harpoon fishery. There's a very limited amount of longline activity for swordfish now on Georges. It's basically directed towards tuna fishing. The new hot swordfish fishery now is handling, rod and reeling, deep drop. Guys are getting very, very adept at it, and I'm sure that's probably catching more fish now than harpooning. So I just wanted to pass that along if anybody had any questions about that. But I feel very fortunate to have been able to be part of this, and to see this and experience it firsthand, because there was nothing like it. I can't explain it. It was just, it was magical. Thanks.
So we're reaching our deadline, and I know that you guys could talk for another 1, 2, 3 hours, so perhaps we will invite you back. We can take a few more questions. Let's spend 5 more minutes. So please feel free to stand up and ask your question.
Did any women do sword fishing?
Yeah.
There was,
Jimmy King's, like, went out.
I'd really be interested in the names.
What's her name that fished out of Gloucester?
well, that was Linda Greenwell.
Linda Greenwell.
She was a-
Oh,
Then,
She's a
yeah,
one-liner.
but from Westport, Jane Ashley?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, on the sport boats, there were lots of women that went out. I don't know that there were any on the commercial boats. Our commercial boats in those days had fairly crude accommodations from some people's standards. And it was fine for us, you know. But I don't think there was a regular woman. Linda Greenlaw started out when she was in college, going out with the Ingraham. And she was a cook, and they were sticking swordfish. And then she migrated into becoming a very, very successful and respected longline captain.
Yeah.
But so, and as far as the demise of the fishery, if you visualize the population of swordfish kind of like a pyramid, okay? And so the bottom of the pyramid are the juvenile fish that start out this big. You know, they're tiny, just little, they look like little paper matches in the water. Phil Rule, who used to own the Harry Glen, was down off the coast of Florida, and he ran into this big shoal of stuff in the water. It was a mile wide and something like 15 miles long. He bailed some out, took them down to Woods Hole, and for analysis, and they said, oh, they were all billfish. They were a combination of swordfish and marlin. There were thousands, hundreds of thousands of them. So that was year one. Year two, a lot of those get eaten, so there's less of them. So the pyramid starts getting smaller. The swordfish don't reach sexual maturity until they're about 100 to 125 pounds, which is halfway up the pyramid. What we were taking with the harpoon fishery was the very top of the pyramid. So you could take that, lop that top off every year, and then the pyramid would grow and replace what you'd taken off. So it was a sustainable fishery. But when the longliners started taking small fish, 40-pound fish, 60, 80, 100-pound fish that had never reached sexual maturity, the whole pyramid shrunk. And we had less at the top to take off. We still did, and there's still big fish, but it's not the same volume, and it's not enough to support this harpoon fishery.
Hooks do not discriminate what they catch. And I can remember putting my boat on a fish, there were two fish in a way, one was small, one was big, and we left the small one and went to the big one. We were highly selective with this thing. Besides, it was easier to hit a bigger fish than it was a small fish.
You mentioned a ruling, a headstrom or something?
The Hague
the
line.
Hague
The
line.
Hague line.
What is that?
So there was a disputed boundary between Canada and the United States. Canada, when the 200-mile limit went in the late, like 76, 77, all the countries said, oh yeah, we'll have 200 miles too. Well, Canada and the United States up in the Gulf of Maine collided with the 200-mile limit. So we had an overlap space there for years. That was called the disputed zone, and we could fish in it and they could fish in it. We didn't go over the Canadian line, they didn't come over our line. But the countries, instead of working that out, said, well, we're going to go to the Hague Court over in Europe. And the Hague, what do we expect? They split it right down the middle. So the Canadians got, as Grant said, all of the Northeast Peak, all of Browns, all of the Northern Edge, and we were excluded from that time on.
Thank you.
More questions?
Yeah, what sort of dollar value would you get doing this? You know, in those day dollars.
We're all millionaires now.
You got $1.380 a pound.
We saw the whole, it was interesting. There was a time during this fishery when there was a big mercury scare. I don't know if any of you will remember that. And there was an embargo supposedly, but Teddy Kennedy was the senator, and he made it legal for us to land a contaminated fish in the United States. We just couldn't import them. So that meant that the Canadians couldn't sell fish here legally. They did sell a lot. But that brought the price of fish up, almost $3 a pound in 1 year. And so, you know, back in the Bill Head days, that first picture you saw, if they got 20 cents out of Al Lee a pound, it would be a miracle. It was very low, but everything was cheap. And
That's
those
dressed
days-
weight.
Yeah.
That's dressed weight, but by the time you get them ready for market to sell them, you lose a lot of weight.
Yeah.
So,
Guys, I'm just curious, you know, you're talking about going out in canyons, 100 fathoms, you know, beyond. I was always thought that the historic Menasha harpoon fishery, and my ignorance, I didn't know about the Westport fishery, was more in that range of 20 to 40 fathoms maybe on the shelf without having to go to the edge. Just from your history in the fishery, was it just necessity drove you guys further out? But, you know, I remember stories, you know, of guys fishing on, you know, at the dump just south of Holman's and, you know, sticking fish there.
yeah, definitely, there were lots of fish caught right at the Vineyard Sound Lightship, the Buzzards Bay Lightship. The boats didn't go very far. That boat that Bill Head was in, I don't even think that was south of Noman's. And there were plenty of fish. There were a lot of fish caught off Gay Head with small boats. But a lot has, you know, the swordfish don't come because of the view or the hysterical society or anything. They're just here to eat. So a lot has to do with the distribution of the mackerel and squid, all the baits that were so common then and got overfished and got scarce. And yeah, we ended up going a lot further than anybody ever had. Nobody had ever harpooned swordfish on the eastern side of Georgia's bank, other than the Canadians that were down there, until probably the 60s.
The first swordfish,
Flying all that way.
Yeah.
That's the scary part.
What? The flying was okay, it was the sudden landing. We were
the first swordfish that the sideshow got, you heard Paul talking about the woman probably not being on a harpoon boat because of the amenities. The first swordfish we got, Russ Walters, who's sitting here, was sitting on one of those amenities when we left Menasha. And we were coming out of Menasha Pike, headed back to Westport, and we were about halfway between Gay Head and Cuddy Hunk, as I remember seeing it on the radar. And Russell saw a swordfish. So we had everything tied down. We got everything loose, got the harpoon out, and got the fish. And there's a picture of it up there somewhere. I don't know, maybe, what did we get, 40, 50 pounds of meat out of it, Russ?
Something like that.
Yeah. But those were the, and now Jack Wilkinson, my son-in-law's father, and somebody else, I can't remember who, harpooned fish between Cuddy Hunk and Gooseberry out of the skiff one time. Yeah. Anyway.
When I was in the Navy, I was standing watch with left boot watch. We're heading to some op area, and I was standing watch up on top of the bridge on the destroyer, and I saw a swordfish. And I started screaming, swordfish, swordfish, swordfish! And then it dawned on me, you know, you fool, there's no one hit us.
Okay, so this is my second attempt to bring this program to a close. Thank you very much.
That was terrific.